It's something we all do every single day, probably without even thinking about it. But why? A yawn is this totally universal human thing, and yet it's one of the great little mysteries of everyday life. So today, we're going to pull back the curtain on this strange reflex. So what's your first guess? Come on, be honest. Are you yawning because you're tired, maybe a little bored already? Or is there something way more complex and frankly a lot more fascinating going on inside your head? Let's find out. All right, to get to the real answer, we have to start by tackling the most common belief about yawning. The one that pretty much everyone has heard at some point. Yeah, that one. The classic idea that we yawn to gulp in a big dose of oxygen when our blood is running a little low. I mean, it sounds right, doesn't it? A deep breath to refresh the system. But as it turns out, the science just doesn't back that up at all. So how do we know for sure? Well, back in the 1980s, a researcher named Robert Praveen decided to put this to the test. He actually had people breathe air that was full of carbon dioxide, or even pure oxygen. And the result? It made absolutely no difference in how often they yawned. Just like that, the oxygen theory was officially busted. Okay, so if it's not about oxygen, then what in the world is it about? Let's get into the leading modern explanation, which totally reframes the yawn. It's not a sign of being sleepy, but actually a really sophisticated piece of biological engineering. This is what researchers Andrew and Gordon Gallup called the brain cooling theory. The whole idea is simple, but it's really powerful. A yawn is basically your brain's personal air conditioner kicking in when it starts to run a little too hot. And this is super important because your brain, for all its power, is incredibly sensitive to temperature. Even a tiny, tiny rise can slow down your thinking and make you feel less alert. So it makes sense that it would need a fast, effective way to get rid of that extra heat. So how does this actually work? Well, it's a pretty cool four-step process. First, when you stretch your jaw wide open, you're actually increasing blood flow to your skull. Then, you take that big, deep inhale of cooler outside air. Third, and this is the clever part, that air rushes past your sinus passages, which act just like a radiator in a car, pulling heat from the blood vessels that are on their way to your brain. And finally, that freshly cooled blood circulates, bringing your brain's temperature right back down to where it needs to be. Now, a great theory needs great evidence, right? So let's look at some of the really clever experiments that were designed to see if this whole brain air conditioner idea was really true. And the results were just crystal clear. Take a look at this. Researchers found that people yawn way more often when they're in a warm environment. But why? Well, think about it. The cool air in a cold room is much better at cooling the blood, so your brain just doesn't need to trigger as many yawns to do the job. Here's another simple but brilliant test. When people held a cold pack to their forehead, their yawning went down dramatically. A warm pack did absolutely nothing. It's like if you can cool the brain from the outside, the internal cooling mechanism, the yawn, just isn't needed anymore. This theory also explains why we yawn when we do. We tend to yawn the most right after we wake up and just before we go to sleep. And wouldn't you know it, those are the two key times of day when our brain temperature is naturally shifting. So it needs a little extra help to manage the transition. So we've pretty much covered the why for when you yawn, but what about that weird thing where seeing someone else yawn makes you want to yawn too? This is where the story gets really fascinating and a lot more social. Seriously, why is that a thing? You might even be feeling the urge to yawn right now just thinking about it. This isn't just a biological reflex anymore, it's a social one. So what possible purpose could it serve? Well, the leading theory is that contagious yawning is all tied up with empathy. Research actually shows that people who score higher on empathy tests are much more likely to catch a yawn from someone. It might be this ancient subconscious signal for social bonding, a way for a whole group to kind of sync up their mental state. It's like one person's brain non-verbally says, hey, I need to cool down and get alert, and everyone else's brain goes, you know what, good idea, me too. And what really helps seal the deal on this empathy connection is the age this all starts. Contagious yawning, it doesn't usually show up in kids until they're about 4 or 5 years old. And that's right around the same time they develop what's called theory of mind, that crucial ability to understand that other people have their own thoughts and feelings. The brain cooling theory is really strong, but, science loves a good plot twist. And it turns out the story of the yawn isn't completely solved just yet. Here's the biggest puzzle piece that doesn't quite fit.
Ultrasounds show that fetuses yawn in the womb, but there's no cool air to breathe in there. This really strongly suggests that yawning might have more than one job, maybe playing a different role in our early development than it does after we're born. So the next time you see someone yawn in a meeting, maybe don't assume they're bored or tired. Instead, you can recognize it for what it most likely is: this incredibly sophisticated, fascinating act of self-care. It's just a sign that their brain is actively working to keep itself in perfect running condition. So, I'll leave you with this question. The next time you feel that irresistible urge to open your mouth wide and take that deep breath, just pause for a second. Instead of fighting it, ask yourself, what is my brain trying to tell me right now? Is it gearing up for a challenge, shifting gears, or is it just trying to keep itself cool?